the, the folks on this group are doing some amazing work in different parts of the world. But there's really sort of a theme here where they're leveraging environmental sensors and accessible data to help communities shape their environment, which I think is really exciting and with lots of possibilities. They're going to show how technology, education, research, engagement, and design all come together for greater impact in our local communities. And I think we have a panel that's really distinctively positioned to touch on all of these components. So I do want to sort of hand it off in just a moment, but would like to introduce our panel first. Uh, just sort of going, I think, in alphabetical, well, I don't know if it's alphabetical order, but we'll start with Carlos. Carlos, do you want to wave while I do a quick introduction? So Carlos Sandoval Alascoago. Did I pronounce it right? Alascoago.
It's Ola Squaga, but it's really complicated. You
Olascoaga.
can you can probably
Apologies. I
tell.
should have. Um, Carlos has been an assistant professor at the School of Architecture and affiliate assistant professor at Corey College of Computer Sciences. Carlos directs the Scalable Design Participation Lab, where he's group develop information models for design, collaboration, computational interfaces for accessible multi-user design and data analysis, and algorithms for large-scale design synthesis. So thank you. Welcome, Carlos. We also have Mark Martin here on the panel, and Mark Martin is an assistant professor, you see you in computer science and a leader in AI, data science, and ed tech located at Northeastern in London. Mark co-founded UBlack Tech to drive innovation and diversity in tech and advises the UK government and industry on digital skills. Mark was also named a top 50 influencer in UK IT by Computer Weekly in 22. So it's great to have you here, Mark. And next, want to introduce Yasser. You want to give us a wave, Yasser?
Hey
We're
everyone.
done. Yasser is a community partnership manager where he bridges the gap between research inquiries and public solicitation for iSuper. His engagement methods allow the research team to receive valuable input that determines our ensuing sensor network placement and data portal design implementations. So we have Yasser talking from the Northeastern side about iSuper and his work there. And then also Sarah, do you want to wave Sarah? All right, there. Sarah is also working with Yasser and others on the iSuper project. And Sarah's a Chelsea resident and a member of the Chelsea School Committee and a postdoctoral research fellow in public health at Brown University. And last but not least, we have Michelle LeBoy, who's an is an associate professor in the School of Architecture and an investigator in the Common Senses Project. Michelle's research and practice are focused on regenerating ecological and cultural spaces in cities to build more resilient communities. So she'll be able to share a bit of perspective of how this looks for design. And for those who know me, my name is Tori Spies. I'm the senior sustainability strategist with sustainability at Northeastern. So welcome everybody. And with that, I will put the slides up and Carlos, he will be on deck. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Tori. Yeah, so thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Carlos. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Architecture and at Corey College of Computer Sciences. And so I'm going to tell you guys all a bit about this project that we call Open Sensing that actually originated a few years back, not in Boston, but in New York City. Can you go to the next slide, please? So in New York City, we are working with a partner organization, Green City Force. Green City Force is a nonprofit organization that does workforce development training in NYCHA with NYCHA residents. So for those of you that are not familiar with New York City public housing system, it's a system of almost 300 developments that are distributed around New York City public housing, which has a number of disadvantaged conditions or residents suffer from a number of different issues, a lot of unemployment rate, and what Green City Forest tries to do is provide a workforce development training program that is based on urban farms that they have been deploying and creating throughout public housing developments. Can you go to the next slide, please? So in the farms that they have been establishing in public housing, they both provide accessible, healthy vegetables and job training. And one of the things that the organization wants to do is characterize the positive impact that their spaces are having in the community. And one of the issues that they have is that even though New York City, the government has a number of sensors that are high resolution and super reliable, and somewhat accessible in terms of sharing the data. The city does not have sensors in every or close to each one of the developments. So part of the goal that we have was to create a more robust and granular framework of sensors that could help them characterize whether or not their work installing urban farms around New York City is having a positive impact in the city as a whole. And secondly, one of the things that we wanted to do was create a low-cost sensor that was built with off-the-shelf parts, so that their AmeriCorps members would also learn how to assemble them throughout the 6 month job training program that they go through. Can go to the next slide. So a couple of years ago, we started this project, and the sensors. The goal was again to be able to measure air quality, the soil moisture. We wanted to also measure temperature and also be able to inform residents of the hyperlocal conditions that were happening on the site. So we were actually able to assemble the sensors for under $100 or $150, depending on the configuration. All the parts are off the shelf, and we created a set of instructions to be able to assemble them as part of their job training program. Can you go to the next slide, please? Uh, Fast forward a couple of years, we brought this project into Northeastern to be able to prototype, assemble, and deploy the sensors much faster. One of the we wanted to be super intentional and super careful with communication with residents to sort of like avoid any potential issues and maintain the level of trust that our partner organization has with them. So to be able to explore the computational aspects and the hardware aspects of our project more rapidly, we started prototyping the sensors throughout the Northeastern campus. So we developed both the hardware platform and the software platform in an open source manner. So everything that we are creating is highly documented and accessible openly. So anyone that purchases the parts through our list of parts can assemble a sensor within an hour or so and can deploy the sensor uh, openly into our network. All the data is open. We built a number of data visualization features. Can you go to the next slide? Where people can browse the data in real time. Next slide, please. And also download all the information in real time. So part of the hope that we have is that based on this low cost sensor module, people will be able to start purchasing and assembling the sensors on their own and building a broader network of sensing devices to provide open data that is much more granular than government-based data sets. The sensors are calibrated in-house and both based on the specifications of the company that produces the sensors. Uh, and we actually have a couple of the sensors located adjacent to some of the Boston government sensors. So we're working with them on calibrating the data to optimize the validity of the information to be able to just make better decisions with the data that we have. And some of the goals that we have with this data sets will be to come up with a dense enough network so we can start making statistical inferences about what features of the built environment contribute to better environmental health. Uh, but anyways, right now we are expanding our project. We're providing a number of sensors for the city of Monterrey in Mexico. So hopefully that will also grow in terms of density and the network. But anyways, thanks so much, and let me know if you guys have any other questions.
Thanks, Carlos. Uh, yeah, I think if we have any clarifying questions, we'll ask them now. Otherwise, I think we'll keep going to make sure we get through everybody's slides and have an opportunity to really engage in discussion at the end. Uh, thank you. So go ahead and Mark, if you could share a little bit about the work you're doing and have been doing in London.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that what happened to me about probably about 3 years ago, the air pollution was really high in the high school because my background is that I've been teaching in secondary school education, which is high school K-12 for the last 15 years. And I was teaching at the time ICT and GCSE computing. And there was a disconnect between what I was teaching and the local challenges on the doorstep of young people. Now, I didn't think necessarily that young people would be engaged in using their digital skills to solve a local problem, but I wanted to really push the boundaries of that. If you go to the next slide.
Sorry. Quick.
But in order to understand young people, you got to understand what type of systems they operate in. And I always kind of go back to this kind of this type of system of micro, meso, and macro. Because if you really want our young people to become informed citizens using their digital skills to solve local-based problems, we got to understand their ecosystem. And for me, it was really important to understand that in the sense that all right, if I want to bring a problem such as air pollution to young people to use their digital skills, what is happening for them in their personal lives? What is the educational policy? What's the research at the moment? And then what kind of attitudes and ideologies are out there in terms of that may prevent or enhance that experience? Next slide. Thank you. But we know that in the UK, we're going through a massive shift in terms of air pollution. It's one of the biggest threats to public health in the UK. And this was the reason why I show this slide is because that's the macro of it in terms of how does air pollution in terms of affect the whole of the UK. And if you go to the next slide, this is more of the micro thing in terms of the young people that were what I was teaching, lung function in our children is 3% less than the national average. So where I was, there was this real case for in terms of how can we help our students be able to do that. And if you look in the picture here, you got young people lifting up placards. So imagine now giving them digital skills, they won't use placards, they can now use their measurements from their air pollution devices to go to the town hall and make significant change. Because I wish I was a young person that really wanted to make a difference apart from creating a really creative placard, but actually saying, actually, I can understand a little bit of data visualization because that was taught in my course, and now I'm able to to showcase that. Next slide. So the aim of this kind of experiment, what we wanted to do is to expose students and schools to modern data science and AI and data visualization techniques, the stuff that we're already doing. But we anticipate that this project will enhance learners' CVs, UCAS applications to get into university, tech portfolios, and career prospects. Next slide. So what I wanted to do is make the students dream. So we came up with giving them some parts from Dyson Foundation. So they gave us some Hoover parts, and the students then started to create these kind of, Utopia air sensor modules. And that's really important around playful design and playful learning that I'll probably talk at another time. But this was really the entry in to really get their engagement. Next slide. And then was given the sensor kits. So apart from making them dream and to experiment in terms of where they would see themselves, we gave them these sensor kits. Next. But the students were really keen in the sense of where could this go. So with these sensor kits, we wanted to promote experiential learning of digital skills in schools using air pollution as a driving force for good, to investigate air pollution in the local area as key components. So we had the sensor infrastructure to collect data, and then abstract to query the data, and then educational materials to enhance teachers and so forth. So if you go to the next slide, please. And we wanted to, so with that air sensor kits that the students were just holding, we had gas sensors, we had particulate sensors, Arduinos, Raspberry Pi. So this is a really basic sensors, but for me, I knew that where this was going to be the entry point to erase that awareness and representation of air pollution through such a small device, we could create a huge impact. Next slide. So here was the prototype. So the students laughed at me because they're like, "Sir, how can you put this on the high street? What if someone robs it, or what if rain comes?" So with prototypes and innovation, people will always kind of comment and critique it. But it was just really interesting that we was able to start capturing their interest. Next slide, please. Where we started to have focus groups with them, started to listen to them in terms of their interests and passions. And what I found is that a lot of the students said to me, well, sir, I've got people in my family that have asthma too. So this does matter to me, and I really want to play an active part. Next. And then we took what the students had took in terms of the prototyping and their vision for this essence. And then with our university students, they were then able to take it to that next level in the sense of automating some of the processes, how do we store some of the data in the cloud, and also geo mapping tool. And if you go to the next slide, next one. So this was the prototype that we designed with the university students, where we was able to have the Arduino, the PM sensors, the gas sensors, and so forth, and the LCD screen to represent the results that were coming through. But what was really magic for me, I think it's on the last slide here, is how it all came together. So from our high school students dreaming, prototyping, and so forth, then our university students, they're making the idea come alive through geo mapping tools, getting the readings. But the one where they're holding the certificate was the holy grail for me, in the sense that these students were able to use their kind of skills that they learned through their Northeastern courses and modules, and then we're able to support these high school students, but also make sense of the equipment. So what would be the natural step now? And I'm going to end here would be is then now we've got this prototype made by the university students, is then to take it back into the high school and show them that what we've been able to develop from the initial kind of having the sensor kits and so forth. So I will end there, and hopefully that's been enjoyable, and you've seen a kind of a mini journey of how I've been able to use it from high school into higher ed and back into high school again.
Thank you, Mark. Really inspiring. Uh, let's see. So, we have, yeah, sir, is this your slides or is these Sarah's? We've got
Yeah, this one's is mine.
okay. I just saw Sarah and I was like, I thought okay. So Yasser and Sarah, yeah. So Yasser and Sarah work together on the iSuper project, and we'll share a bit both on their experience with that project.
Yeah, I'll be really quick, because most of my slides are just pictures. But I work for a Northeastern air quality program under civil environmental engineering called iSuper. iSuper stands for Intelligent Solutions for Urban Air Pollution and Equity Research. If we can go to the next slide, please, Tori. And so essentially, we know that air is a shared resource and air pollution is an urban hazard. It's a large environmental health risk. It varies from block to block. It depends on a neighborhood square, on a neighborhood scale, spatially where you are, how it affects you. And so we try to create tools and aggregate data for health protective decisions. And we'll show you some of that going forward. So you can see to the left, these are our air quality sensors that we deploy in the greater Boston area, specifically in Chelsea and Brookline. So those are the pictures to the left. And I apologize, these are the spam calls. And to the right, you can see that we're creating a live data portal that captures that air quality data and relays that information to the public on a website link. Next slide, please, Tori. So essentially, how we create an air quality monitoring network is all through partnerships. You need permissions to be able to install and deploy sensors at different places. And so that takes getting to know organizations, stakeholders across sector, whether it's schools, libraries, nonprofit organizations, housing authorities. We try to collaborate with as many people as possible, not only to deploy the air quality sensors at their sites, but then engage with the public about the air quality findings. So these are some of the collaborators that we have worked with, not only to give them air quality sensors, but again, provide some type of educational outreach as well that you'll see in the next slides. So for this slide, essentially what we're trying to do in creating a air quality monitoring network is really focus on health-related protection and trying to provide behavioral modifications, but also an understanding of the spatial variability from one place to another, because you can be adjacent to one another and dependent on weather or the filtration systems, the air quality and pollution might differ, although it's so close. And so with these given things, again, we're trying to create online data portal that relays that information back to the community so that they're aware and they know what is happening nearby to them and they can make the correct decisions. So this is a lot of pictures essentially of our education with youth development programs. And we offer different types of engagements, whether it's to the bottom, you see air quality presentations. So we do that. We also do hands-on sensor activities. We also use Arduino circuits, just like Mark mentioned. And at the top, we also do air quality sensor tours for the youth to go to each sensor and investigate each site. And right at the bottom, you'll see that they have a portable instrument. It's called a dye sensor, where they go from site to site and collect the air at those specific places. So these are examples of some how we try to provide outreach with youth development programs. And so, trying to sticking to the theme, I think you can press one more, Tori, so that yes, thank you. The challenge is that, I'm sorry, if you can go one back. The challenge is that air quality varies obviously significantly from one location to another. So how can we create a real-time data portal that integrates resident-centered design? That is our goal, not only to deploy these sensors, but to co-create that data portal with the public, with community in mind. If you can go to the next one, Tori. So these are pictures of us soliciting inquiries from the public, asking the community how they would like the data portal to be designed. And we do this through community events, focus groups, online surveys, we newsletters. We ask the public directly. We give them a prototype, a better prototype, and then we insist on what features would you like to see as part of the data portal, and then we create it. So these are the pictures that show us in action, essentially get to know the community. Next slide, please. And for this one is that we are trying to visualize the data that we aggregate. Data sets are just standard numbers, but how can we then present this information back to the public in a digestible manner, in a sense? So we create infographics, again, have research presentations, we create data maps and integrate auxiliary community data sources all into the data portal. And this is my last slide. It's just acknowledgments to all of our partners, collaborators that make this happen, to our community advisory board, and as well as to Northeastern for funding this project. And I believe now I'll pass it off to Sarah for her slides.
Hi, so I'm one of Yasser's community partners. I live in Chelsea, and we met when Yasser came to an event that I was attending as a resident. And I said, "Hey, you should do this thing with me. I have a program called the Chelsea Research Festival. I would love for your team at Northeastern to be involved." So one or two of Yasser's pictures in his slides was about the Chelsea Research Festival. I'm just going to describe a little more about what the Chelsea Research Festival is. So I think you probably all know that Chelsea is a relatively low income city with a lot of immigrants and a lot of Latinx folks, and faces a lot of environmental injustices, which result in health inequalities. All these things result in health inequalities. And for these reasons, a lot of researchers from outside institutions like to come and do research in Chelsea, just like Yasser's team. But a lot of the times, especially when these research projects involve participant data collection with residents, those residents don't end up hearing about the results. And a lot of the time, the people who are conducting the research aren't from Chelsea. And meanwhile, Chelsea residents are less likely to end up in positions of decision-making power in research institutions due to the systematic economic and educational barriers that our community faces. And these outside researchers might not very well understand the reality of Chelsea folks' lives. And so maybe they're not even asking the right questions. Like maybe there are other priorities that Chelsea community members would like to see addressed. So for that reason, we decided to start the Chelsea Research Festival. Next slide. And the goals are pretty simple, just to disseminate research about Chelsea to Chelsea residents, to expose Chelsea residents, especially young people, to career and educational paths in research, and to give everyone the chance to network, exchange ideas, and to create bridges between each other, people from all sectors. Next slide. So what is the Chelsea Research Festival? It's a poster session. It's a poster session at Chelsea High School. We use these electronic posters, which is really fun. It's during the school day, and the eligibility criteria to be a presenter for a poster is your project has to be research in some way, whatever the definition of research is. And either the research has to be about Chelsea in some way, or one of the researchers has to be a Chelsea community member. So a Chelsea High graduate studying biology at BU could come and present their biology thesis, or a Harvard professor who's studying the randomized controlled trial of giving debit cards with no strings attached can come to who sorry, this is a project that happened. Debit cards to Chelsea residents to understand how these debit cards would affect their lives can come and present that project as well. Next slide. So we end up having folks from academic institutions presenting alongside local government and community-based organizations presenting their program evaluation or monitoring data, and students presenting their class projects and other, passion projects that they've worked on. Next slide. We also try and make the research festival, a way that young people can learn more about not just what they're doing in school, but see themselves as researchers and understand what is research and how does research impact their lives. So we have these little posters that kind of describe that. Next slide. And folks like Yasser and the iSuper team come and they both present their posters, but they also engage the attendees in different ways. So this is yet another way that Yasser's team has come into the Chelsea community to do community engagement. They're doing their Lego air sensors here. Next slide. And here's MGH similarly doing something like that. They're doing a genetics bingo. And next slide. And I would say that the most wonderful thing about the Chelsea Research Festival is that you get to see academics and young people presenting side by side as equals and presenting to each other and in conversation with each other. So we're really grateful for the iSuper team for really enthusiastically wanting to engage with us at the Chelsea Research Festival. They've been creative, not just in it's been a bi-directional exchange where I've been able to help connect Yasser to different community groups that he's wanted to work with. And also Yasser contributes not only his time and energy in helping plan the festival, not only does iSuper come and present, but you guys have also been financially generous to us, and that financial assistance is really important to keeping the research festival going. I'm really grateful. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Love how you work together as well. And Yasser did not pause at all, not think twice about offering to present today, but also mentioned that I think you have 8 different community engagement events this month.
Right. A lot going on.
So it is definitely a key part of the iSuper project.
Yes, ma'am.
And then Michelle, if you could share a little bit about the work that you were doing.
Sure thing. Thanks for inviting me. As you mentioned before, I'm an associate professor in the School of Architecture. I'm a designer and a researcher, and a lot of my work explores the intersection of local design decisions and which happen at a human scale and larger ecosystems. So I became interested in sensors to help people interact with the environment around them and to activate public space. I did public installations in landscapes that changed color when green infrastructure was collecting stormwater, or displayed data about groundwater levels in Boston sidewalks. So I built apps that would allow people to upload data and understand measurements relative to their body and where they stand. So really bringing the data down to like a human scale. So sensors for me initially were not only an instrument to understand the impacts of design on local ecosystems, but most importantly to empower community to reimagine their relationship to the environment and what agency they had to transform it locally. If you go to the next slide. So in the last 2 years, I started working in the project Common Census with other faculty at Northeastern who know a lot more about sensors and data than I do, to explore how this data can empower communities to not just visualize, but to transform their environments towards environmental justice. We're working with community partners like Project Ride and DSNI, which is the Southeast Core Neighborhood Initiative in Roxbury, and with the City of Boston, to develop a sensor network that will measure heat, noise, air pollution, and to design how the data will be shared and used, similar to what Jasper was sharing before. If you go to the next slide. But this work actually started in a small pilot site in Chelsea as well. And it is Chelsea, you've heard a little bit about already, is an environmental justice community in the industrial Boston Harbor. And we were measuring hazards around just one block to see what impact green infrastructure had around one project before and after redevelopment. And the idea behind that was to try to understand how community activism, which had happened before we got involved, transformed this site, which was, dark, impermeable surfaces, a lot of truck traffic, into a better neighboring building. And if you click one more time, it will show you the difference of what they achieved. They added lighter surfaces, green buffers, tree canopy, infiltration strategies, and a larger buffer between neighbors and truck traffic. For those of you who know Chelsea well, this is 22 Willow on the southern side of Chelsea. We didn't have anything to do with this design. This was all community-led, working with the developers. But we were interested in measuring the impact before and after because it allows us to understand how to quantify the variation that happens in hazards around one site based on where you place buildings, based on where you put green infrastructure, and see how much one development can improve environmental conditions locally and improve equity. And so the City of Chelsea, who's our partner in this, has now asked us to develop a participatory approach to explore how green infrastructure and other public benefits of open space can be embedded into the redevelopment of West Chelsea, which is another industrial area of Chelsea, into a new transit-oriented district. So we're beginning to explore that in two of our courses with Professor Moira Sellner and I, on a design course and a participatory modeling course. We've been engaging with La Colaborativa and the City of Chelsea and the strategic planners from UTO that are doing the Palante plan. If you go to the next slide, this is where the bulk of our work is now, is in Boston's Blue Hill Avenue corridor in Roxbury. We're doing this work at a much larger scale to explore many sites and a longer data cycle in an entire neighborhood. So first, at the top in this slide, you see the community first map their lived experience of environmental hazards. Then we co-design and install the network of sensors along areas of concern that they had shared to measure and understand the hazards and the causes. And then we will be co-designing solutions for green infrastructure that can mitigate those hazards with the community and use the data to support advocacy to make those solutions happen. If you go to the next slide, similar to what Jasper was sharing, we're designing a data portal that combines qualitative and quantitative data. It shows community stories. You can click on each of these dots and read a story that a specific person said about a specific place. And you can look at sensor data in another map that shows the variation from one site to another, from one time of the day to another, to identify where design interventions may be most needed. As you can note on the next slide. The most exciting thing for me is that later this year, we're hoping to begin using this data to engage the community in co-design activities to so that they can imagine what green infrastructure could do and look like in each part of the neighborhood that they've identified and how they can continue using this data in the future. Thank you.
That's wonderful. So cool. Love the work you all are doing. I might ask a couple questions and then I'm going to ask folks to put questions in the chat or raise your hand as well from the audience. And stop the share here so we can see everyone. It's interesting because every one of these projects, all of your work is reliant on technology, on sensors, on and looking at really getting them out, not just not satellites, but really getting them into the nooks and crannies of neighborhoods and places. And yet, equally, if not more critical, is engagement. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the importance of engagement to your work, and maybe starting you with you, Yasser, about kind of how you got to this work and why you think it's so important for it.
Well, for us as at iSuper, I'll try to be brief because I know there's a lot of people on this call, and I definitely want to hear from them. But when I came here as a staff member, they basically gave me a blank canvas to work with whoever I wanted, however I wanted. And I'm a very imaginative person. So when you give somebody leeway to work their magic, I just started reaching out to folks, and that has to do with doing your own due diligence of knowing who's in the community, what organizations are in the community, doing asset mapping, having a point of contact database, filling in information for that contact of what is their role in that organization, who are the community leaders. But all that being said, um, once we understood, I guess, the geographic landscape of where we were working at, from there, it's really easy to just reach out to folks, whether it's like going in person and asking for a meeting, maybe calling them or sending an email and introducing, in my case, our project, our research, and our intentions in working with them. And usually it's met with some type of approval, like, okay, sure, you want to, interact with our audience. How? And then that takes a little bit of work of like, how do you want to engage with that specific audience, right? Whether it's youth, senior citizens, general population, maybe vulnerable demographics, but trying to cater it to be culturally relevant. Uh, Providing activities, engagements, events that people resonate with. That is kind of the hard part, is to really think about putting yourself in other people's shoes and how would they like to engage with this air quality material. Um, but it's really easy to reach out to folks. Again, whether it's through emails or calls or in person, setting up that Zoom meeting. We call it exploratory meetings. You just set that up. But then the hard part comes in. Okay, what do we want to do with these folks? And doing something again that resonates with them, that their audience would approve of. So that's essentially what we do at iSuper and how we've come to work with libraries and schools and nonprofits and all of these other organizations. It really just starts by reaching out to folks and then being imaginative.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Yeah, Sarah. Sarah, from your perspective in the community, what do you think organizations are looking for in a research partner? What advice would you give to other faculty or researchers on this call?
I think that when it comes to community partners, the organizations already have their own work and their own missions. And so it's hard if a researcher comes in and says, this is what I want to do. Like, will you help support? Because, they probably have a lot on their plate already. So if you can start from a place of imagining with them, what sort of research would also serve their goals, or how the research can be mutually beneficial. Really, that's the most important thing. It's not always possible because sometimes you're doing a multi-site study and like everything needs to be uniform or whatever. But starting with like making sure that you ask a lot of questions and come in a place of listening first instead of just this is what I want to do. That's usually the most important thing.
Yeah, thank you. Um, and Michelle, real quickly, if you could speak, you had a slide where you talked about co-creating at multiple steps along the way. How has that been really important for your project?
Uh, well, I'm as a as a designer, I feel like creating is always there's always a collaborative process. That's not always true in research, but I'm very used to like an iterative process. You're constantly getting input from multiple stakeholders, and you're synthesizing what the priorities of many different people. In community-based research is the same idea. We're constantly adapting the research concept to the community priorities. And so it takes time. It's a slower process, but it's a very worthwhile time spent. Some of the examples I can think of is, noise was not in our original plans. We didn't think that that was something we were going to study, but that emerged as one of the most important concerns for the community in Roxbury. So we added noise to our sensor boxes, and it changed the way we were thinking about what we were collecting and how we were defining health. Um, the stories people tell also help us understand connections between hazards that we would not have seen in sensor data. For example, people connected flooding with increased concerns about rats, and that led us to look for other sources of data because you can't really measure rats with sensors, but you can look at 311 data that tells you how many people have reported rats in what locations at what times, and sort of look at and study those relationships. And so this has expanded, from sensors to mapping all sorts of data and ways to understand and make sense of those connections. And it's an iterative process with the community. And I think it's a way to make sure that the research actually is responsive to what the questions the community has.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I do want to open it up to the audience. But for Mark and Carlos, I curious where you have found some real successes and what advice you would give both in sort of collecting and being able to really democratize the data and access to that data, and then in actually creating these informed digital citizens to be able to make use of that data.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that a lot of the data is not like some of the bigger sensors that they use across the city is very secretive in a certain way. It doesn't give you all of the information that you would want. But with the data that you have access to, it's about, as someone who has now access to this information, how you disseminate it. So in London, I was really surprised to find that, um, the highest hospital administration for young persons to do with air pollution, respiratory illnesses, and so forth. And if the air pollution is high in a particular area, the attendance to the high school is going to be low the following day. So when you start looking at, the macro data and then getting the students to use their little devices to look at data, how much air pollution is coming into the playground and through the air vents into the classroom, then that's when it all comes alive for them. So again, we can show them the macro stuff, but for them locally, it's about giving them these tools. And as I said, I wish I was when in my school days, we were given these tools to interact with the environment around me rather than, just doing these ad hoc science experiments.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I guess to us, working with a community organization has been super useful in terms of rethinking how we present information. A lot of the work that we started doing now is building like not digital interfaces that allow to explain how information is measured, what information means, and also enable residents to put their own experience into the loop of how you interpret information. So we're building a printed media that is playful and has a language that relates much more with residents than the sensor dashboards that we have been creating. And we feel like that has been much more successful in getting residents engaged and interested in the topics. But it's also been like a back and forth between many different types of residents and many community members that are involved. Some people want to get the data out there and put focus on it, whereas what others have found is that maybe they don't want to discuss air quality issues in NICHA, for example, because that might bring other issues in terms of like people might not want to be willing to come to some of the commercial areas around some of these developments because of perceptions of risk and air quality measurements, etc. So it's been like a back and forth. So I feel like being able to step back and work with different audiences, both in northeastern NICHA and now in Mexico, has been super helpful.
Nice. I, John, you had a question in the chat. Do you want to go ahead and ask it? Then I can ask it. But
Yeah,
yeah, please, John.
the question was about the Chelsea Research Festival. So I love that idea of mixing the student researchers with the academic researchers and all the social capital building. I can imagine that going on. But I was wondering how you uh, engage or recruited the academic researchers to come to a community event because um, I can imagine that may not be as straightforward as it should be.
A lot of really organic outreach. I mean, we distribute the call for abstracts to like the MGH Chelsea email list, and a lot of the research happens at MGH. But a lot of the outreach is individual contacts that I do to people like I encounter. Um, yeah, it's a little exhausting, but also it's really fun. And as time goes on, people start to present multiple years in a row, which is totally fine by me, even if they're presenting the same poster because there's a different audience. So it's easier every year.
Thanks, Sarah. And Terrence, are you able to ask your question?
Yeah, I can ask my question. My question is really on how do we make this data that is gathered by, all these different sorts of ways into giving the resources, because oftentimes the data is great. I mean, we now that we can know, we can start to begin to advocate, and now that we have more accurate data, more holistic data on all these different regions, what are some of the strategies that we can recommend to our local groups and say, hey, these are the resources, this is the data, but you as an individual might begin to start to gather those components, but how do you communicate what you want to see to make transformative change?
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Um, I think that a lot of the local community groups are already advocating, even without the data. Um, so I think it's really important to follow their lead. Like Green Roots in Chelsea already does so much state and local advocacy. And they're really good at it and they know how to do it. So researchers, I think, should really follow their lead. Um, sometimes sometimes like especially with the really localized data, you are providing a new insight and taking it to like I'm thinking of Chelsea City Hall is already very open to implementing changes according to data, so it's not so much a fight the way it would be like at maybe the state level. So having that partnership and that like those lines of communication is going to be really important. And also making sure that you ask the communities what sort of data is useful for you. So asking City Hall, what sort of insights are you looking for that you're not already getting, that so that they can, because if you're collecting data that they already know about, then it's not going to be actionable. And likewise, for, activists who are going to fight at the State House or whatever, what sort of data would help you support what sort of data would equip you to make your argument to help you in your fight?
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I wish we had more time, but I'm hoping in the last couple minutes, maybe some of you can share your final thoughts and any suggestions for how people can get involved with similar work.
So yeah, just to so from a London perspective, we've been having a few conversations with the iSuper program and also with Boston to see if there's any kind of cross the pond collaboration to take place. And then also we're exploring around with this whole hype around AI and LLM models. Is there anything that we could put in place for, say, like for example, a young person interacting with air pollution data through LLM models and so forth? So those are kind of the next kind of natural steps. But yeah, all things data science too. We're also visualizing how do we visualize this air pollution in new and exciting ways. I know in London we've done some work around AR and VR. So when people put on a headset, they can actually see in front of them the air pollution that comes from vehicles and comes from other kind of things. So we're trying to see as much as possible the emerging technologies and how does that play a role.
Anyone else want to add to that or plug it? See Sarah, you said you can submit your research to the Chelsea Research Festival.
We're planning on it.
All right, perfect. Well, and I hope, it's been wonderful to kind of hear you all connect too on your research and how you employ it and be able to be a community there. I hope we can have more of that. And others, I think you know where to reach us, so please feel free to reach out if you have further questions. And thank you, Sarah, Michelle, Mark, Carlos, Yasser. Really appreciate your being here today.
Thank you for having me.
A wonderful
My
weekend.
pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Take
Take
care.
care.